Hello, it's it's the sermon, but I'm wearing lots of clothes today because it's cold. It's the first really cold day of the year, and the heating hasn't come on yet. But outside it's gorgeous, and I'm gonna give you a quick look. That's the colours are just coming, so it's really nice. Anyway, apart from freezing to death, here's the sermon for today. It begins with a collect. The collect gets its name from the idea of collecting together the themes of the service and the themes of the readings. And sometimes we have an alternative collect, which is a little bit less Anglican and a little bit more creative. So that's what I've got for you today. God of all who wander in the wilderness, you go before us as a beacon and guide. Lead us through all danger. Sustain us through all desolation, and bring us home in peace to the land you have prepared for us. Amen. This prayer seems at first glance very much a journey theology prayer. The spiritual journey, it's a powerful image that's been used in Christian spiritual language, but it's also a metaphor rather than something to actually physically do. Metaphor comes via Latin from the Greek meaning transfer towards. A metaphor is it's sort of like a backhoe that picks up a troublesome rock that you've got in your garden and lifts it very carefully and astonishingly to fill that piece at the top of a stone archway that you've been building that becomes the keystone and holds everything in place. And what you thought was a useless thing that stopped flowers growing becomes, in fact, the thing that holds everything together. Metaphor reveals the unexpected meaning in a word that you've just spoken, or it describes your sudden realization that your desire to leave and travel to a distant land is not blocked by COVID, but enabled by the narrowing restrictions of life. Without those trips, you can stay here and look at the lovely transformation of the trees from yellow to brown to gold and to red. You can look at how you're living, your way of living. You can slow down because you can't run off. Slow down and just look around you. Look at your house, look at your room, look at your kitchen, look at your family. And wonder how you could make this place better. A place to return to, not after a long trip, but day after day after day. How can you change this part of the world that you live in by staying still and experiencing it differently? The collect says, not all who wander in the wilderness are trying to get out of it. Some of them are trying to get into it. It's the wilderness of living the same life in a radically new way. The pathless wilderness is a metaphor. It's bringing something forward. It's like walking in a woodland, noticing the flowers and the bugs and the path, instead of hurtling along a highway in a fast car, unaware of the amazing foliage and life. In Philippians, Paul is caught up in a metaphor. He really wants to go to Philippi and teach the faith there. He wants to learn from that community how they are finding a way to be Christ-like in a very Roman, non-Jewish city. But he also wants to die and be resurrected into the full presence of Christ. Death or life. These are like two doors next to each other leading to different destinations, and Paul wants both of them. How many times do you get caught in that either-or situation? Should I leave my job and get a new job? Should I go away for the weekend? Should I stay put? Should I call up my great aunt Joan and have a chat with her? Or should I go and have a cup of tea? But also, serious questions in life. What should I do with the relationship that I'm in that is unsatisfying? What should I do about the way life seems to be closing in on me, and my options seem fewer, and maybe I should do something dramatic and go somewhere else? You want to go forward, but the cost may be too high and the risk too dangerous. You might like your present life, but sense there is much more in life than you're experiencing now. The collect again. God of all who wander in the wilderness, you go before us as a beacon and a guide. Lead us through all danger. Sustain us through our desolation. And bring us home in peace to the land you have prepared for us. There's a lot in that prayer. A lot of evangelical teaching takes our frustration and our discomfort with ourselves as a proof that Jesus is calling you to throw yourself into a big leap of faith, into a whole new and largely unknown life, leaving behind everything you had. I certainly can remember the shift in my life from a direction of science where physics would lead me, and finding a truth that felt deeper and a different dimension of reality. I did leap into a faith commitment in Jesus, and that really was the end of my assumed career as a science person and probably a high school teacher. Evangelical zeal is a good thing, and evangelical action is a good thing. Making radical shifts can be just right and the only life-giving choice. And there is a time when God leads us not to change context, location, work, relationships, and everything that defines us. When life is hard or dull or painful, the temptation is just to walk out the door and never come back. But to stay still and see everything changed by a metaphor is what these readings invite us to. Let's look for a minute at Jesus' story of the workers in the vineyard. What did the owner of the vineyard see in his employees, the labourers he hired to get his harvest in? Those who had worked all day rejected those who had worked only a smaller part of the day. Perhaps the owner saw people who had spent a day trying to get work and finding at farm after farm that there was no work for them to do. And having failed in proactivity, looking for a job, they gave up and went to the marketplace in the slim hope of a little work and a little pay. Perhaps the owner saw them as equal, or maybe better than the people he hired early in the morning. Better for having hustled rather than just sitting about in a marketplace. Perhaps he saw the late hires as sloppy and late risers in a competitive market. Or maybe he saw them as people with a family to feed that day, and he had enough and to spare. Perhaps he looked at them and thought, everybody needs a daily wage. He saw, I think, need rather than entitlement, and chose to meet those needs. His vision shifted from how much can I get and give as little as possible to what can I give this person and their children in return for what each of them can give me. For many of us in the Anglican Church and on the island in Toronto, the thing that might be worrying us is getting old. The energy of your 50s and 60s plus is running low or running out. The visions for change and transformation of society have not really taken root as you hoped for. The causes we upheld and laboured for have achieved success, but often not enough. We worry about the sheer weight of industrial humanity, that ever-growing, ever-hungry species. Can our world withstand it? We worry about aches and pains and the signals of decline, physical and mental. Decline, the slippery slope into decay and death. Well, yes, but also no. With the end of busy, active, pressured lives, there comes the expansion of time. If you choose to notice time on your hands, simply the truth that you have time, then you don't have a problem to solve by returning to hyperactivity, but you have a choice to make. Not something to run away from, but something to walk towards. You can fill time as it always has been. You can volunteer, you can have hobbies, you can create busyness, and so you can restructure your life into the old pattern of Monday to Friday, getting up early, being busy till 4 o'clock in the afternoon or something. You can try to fill it. You can do all those things. Or you could create space and use it differently. You can volunteer. You can have hobbies. You can use your space to be slower. You can use your space to take half an hour each morning, an hour in the afternoon, whatever works for you, time in the evening instead of watching television. Take time to ponder, to look, to smell, to taste. You can create space and use it. You can take time. I remember years ago being on a retreat, and we did this thing called the eating a piece of bread exercise, where you had a little piece of bread about a few centimeters cubed, and you put it in your mouth. Well, you held it in your hand and looked at it for a long time, had a good look at it, and then you felt it, and you squidged it about a bit, and then you popped it in your mouth, and you just let it sit on your tongue, and you noticed the saliva glands start to go, oh, there's something in here, we better get busy and start dissolving it. And then that's about 5 minutes after the beginning, we were allowed to chew a little, like 5 chews, and to notice what was happening, to notice how the taste of the bread changed from being breadish to being soggyish, and then to being sweet, very, very sweet, as the saliva worked on the carbohydrates and shifted them into sugars. The whole eating the piece of bread took about 20 minutes, and it was just a little piece of bread. But honestly, what an amazing piece of bread it was, to go slowly, to take time. So you can do that in the morning. You can eat your toast and jam slowly, savouring each texture and flavour. And you can wonder in amazement at where this jam came from. What trees did these fruit grow on, or bushes? Who picked them? Where were they? What was the weather like? Who were the people picking? Who bottled and who designed jam jars? Marvellous things. And it's just so much to consider in the jam that's spread on the toast. There's so much you can do and pay attention to and be thankful for. Be thankful. It's easy for me to be less than thankful about jam because I really like marmalade. And jam's pretty good, but nothing's as good as marmalade on toast. However, when I have got jam on bread, I can choose to think, I'll have toast and marmalade another time, but now I'm in jam. It's not a problem to be solved, not a thing to be regretted, but an unusual thing to be celebrated. Regardless of your age, and this is a handy example for me because I'm working with age myself now. You can choose to see the journey of life differently. We tend to put forks in the road of life, labelled for better or for worse. And sometimes there's a label in front of a turn that says, I don't know which way I prefer to go. Or there's a fork in the road and you really want to go both ways. And like Paul, you say, I'm hard pressed between the two. My desire is to depart, which is the road to the right. But the road to the left may be where I should be. And if I go there, I'll have all sorts of experiences. But if I go there, I'll be with the Lord. And then Paul thinks, really, if we could actually faithfully, trustfully, and hopefully turn to God, we might be able to say to God, well, God, if I choose not to fight and struggle and I just let this unfold, which is what Paul did, will you help me look for you in the small things of life? Will you open my eyes to your love in the friendships I already have? Will you show me how to serve you in helping people I know who are aging with me? Can you let me be satisfied in only giving you an hour instead of a day, if that's all the energy I have for it? I've tried to be first, but now, if the last will be first and the first will be last, then wherever I am, I'll be with you, and it'll be okay. I invite you in the spirit of this sermon to take half an hour today and sit quietly. Let your mind and heart settle on what things keep arising as a problem for you. And then put away good or bad, better or worse thinking. Just let what keeps coming into your mind, the puzzle that needs to be solved or the question that seems to need an answer, just let this thing arise in your mind and look at it without judging, without problem solving. Just look instead as if through a door that's just been opened. You don't have to run through the door or shut the door. Just sit quietly, letting thoughts arise. Ask God to tag the important thoughts for you. And when you spot one which now appears to really matter, just look around it. Roll it in your mind, like rolling that piece of bread in your mouth and seeing how it changes if you just hold on to it without making a decisive move. Stay away from either or thinking. Let God's Spirit lead you. See what arises with curiosity rather than looking for categories of success or failure. The thing you have that arises as you sit down to ponder what's happening in your life may be like that rock in the garden that's in the wrong place, but could become a keystone. That's letting a metaphor work. Let the Spirit of God bring and change and transform. So many of the big difficulties in life we don't have to solve. We simply have to pay attention as we move through them. And it is astonishing how the quiet, invisible hand of God, the breath of the Spirit, can bring you out the other end so much better than you could have managed if you tried to do it on your own. Amen. Bye.